So one question that I get asked quite often is, how do I start a fire in the rain? And that depends. It's somewhat of a difficult question just to answer and say this is the definitive answer to that, because there's a lot of variables that can come into play. What time of the year is it? Did it just start raining? Has it been raining for a long time? You have a shelter? All these different things. So the best way to combat that is learn a variety of different skills like we learn here on this channel, and then apply them to your situation. That's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna teach you a new skill, something that I didn't go over yet, of how to utilize your shelter component that you have along with you, which is probably a tarp, in order to get your fire started, and then what we call flip it into your shelter really quickly and really easily. When you see it, it's gonna make a ton of sense. So let's get rolling with it. All right, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna start by setting up our shelter. Now, in my case here, of course, we're using one of the T60 shelters, but any tarp shelter that you have, you can utilize this technique for. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is, of course, set up the ridgeline part of the shelter. So we have the ridgeline built in. So we're just gonna set that up nice and easy here, and then that's our starting point. So we know at that point, of course, our shelter's already halfway set up once we get our ridgeline in place. Okay, so before we go any further, what we would typically do now is stake out the backside, okay? But we're not gonna do that for this technique. The second part that you need to know is that when you set up a lean-to shelter, and I'm gonna set my lean-to up with it facing back that way, okay? If I put my butt cheeks up against my ridgeline, I take a step out, that's the most ideal spot for your fire lay. It's far enough away that it's not gonna cause damage to your shelter system, and it's close enough that you're still gonna get radiant heat. Now, knowing that where I'm actually standing right now is where my fire is going to go, we're gonna utilize our shelter system, not to cover us up, but to cover this area up. So essentially what we're gonna be doing is flying this tarp, and then once our fire gets started, we're gonna flip our tarp over into that lean-to configuration. So it's literally just a flip-flop of the direction our tarp is initially gonna be set up. Now, the only thing that you're gonna need to do with this technique is you are gonna have to have some extra cordage along with you for the backside. Typically, you're gonna use your loop or your grommet to stake that out. You might have small little loops tied on, but you're gonna need a longer line on this to pull it to whatever tree is in the area in order to fly the tarp. Now, another little hot tip I can give you is when you are running that second line, okay, that tie-out line, from your tarp loop or grommet to whatever tree, my recommendation is to use a toggle, okay? And you're gonna see later on, once we get this fire going, we need to be somewhat diligent with quickly moving this. The last thing we wanna do is destroy our shelter with flames. So this is gonna be somewhat of a quick release, and it's gonna work out perfectly. So toggle it up and you'll be good to go. Okay, so now my tarp is flown. Now, again, just to recap, the back side of this tarp, that is our structural ridge line that we're utilizing when we actually set the shelter up in a lean-to configuration. So it's important that that's waist height or a little bit lower, and that it's nice and tight, okay? Then what I did was I ran the tarp out, okay, and I tied it off with secondary lines that I had attached to it in order to get it to fly. Now, it's important that when you do that, okay, you think about angling one end, which I don't know how much you can see that in the camera, but this back side, okay, to my left, to your right, okay, is angled up higher. So I tie that up higher in a tree. That's gonna allow water to shed off the back side, okay? Now, why that's important is because if you make it perfectly flat and it's raining hard, okay, you're gonna start gathering a lot of water in the middle. Now, with that said though, this technique, we know the water is gonna drain off the backside. If we have something like a pot, we can gather that rainwater. Or if we're really in a situation we need to gather water, we can make it more flat. We just have to be diligent with continuous, not letting that get too heavy in the middle there that we can actually damage our tarp. So let it collect, gather the water, let it collect, gather some water. This is only very temporary. You should not have to have this set up all that long at all. Okay, so what I have done now is I collected material, I split out some material as my base and my backstop, and now I'm gonna begin to actually create my fire to make fire so I can warm up. Now, there's two different things that you can do here. You can either set this up initially in this configuration and then we can flip it back out of the way when we're ready to go and our fire's working, or we can put it initially into that lean-to configuration, and we can go and gather our materials, work inside our lean-to, and then flip this over when we're ready to get our fire going. What you need to remember with this technique and why we're utilizing this is because if you light a small little match or you have a small little flame and the wood's all damp out here and you try to get that ignited and it's a more constant rain, you might have a very hard time with that. So this is offering us protection and keeping at least that wetness from hitting that open small flame, okay? So everything's ready to go. Important, everybody, important right now. Once this gets going, okay, we can't let this damage our shelter. We need to get the shelter out of the way. That's where those toggles are gonna come into play. They're quick release, we can pull it. We don't want our shelter also to fall into our fire. So you need to stay on top of this. There's a bunch of different moving parts going on here. We're working on our fire. We should have that down pat from practice to the point that once this is going, we know it's gonna keep burning. I could pop this out and flip backwards into the right configuration, okay? Perfect. So what we're gonna do, I got some fire starter here. I'm gonna set that stuff down. I have a little bit of fat wood that I carry along with me too. I'm gonna process that onto there, some shavings of that, nice and quick. All right, now we're gonna get this lit up. All right, so good to go. We have open flame now. And at this point, I have some time, okay? So I'm gonna make sure I get all my fire starting stuff put away so it doesn't get lost. And now I can start using my small material to feed onto that open flame, okay? Now, I need to watch this because we know small material can really quickly create big flames, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to feed this in, let this small stuff start to burn. And it is a little bit damp, so I'm gonna have to work with it a little bit more than I would normally on a nice dry day out here. I can watch that start to burn. I can begin to add some more. Now, what I'm gonna start doing at this point, while this is starting to burn, is I'm starting to plan my action. I know I have my tent pegs with me to flip this back. I'm gonna move the camera back. I can drop my toggles out and I'm gonna be good. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop my toggles out. Drop out one, and you notice I'm protecting my shelter so it doesn't go into the fire. Drop out number two, okay? Now, the top of this shelter is gonna be wet, so flip it, all right? All right, and there you go. Like that, we protected our fire from any precipitation during the initial starting phase. And then we set up our lean-to. So now we have coverage that I can open up my backpack. I can place whatever blanket or ground mat, which in my case, I have a larger plastic sheet. I can place that down. I can still get warmth from my fire. It is protected. And I can build that up now. So as the rain continues or as it picks up, my fire is going to be able to sustain itself in these conditions. All right, so that's the end of the video. I know I'm gonna have some questions. When the T60 is coming back in stock. They should be early May back in stock due to the overwhelming number of orders we initially got, and thank you for everybody who purchased them already. We were totally out of fabric way before the next order came in. So it is on its way in, and they will be done being produced and sewn up and stuff early May. So check them out on the website. You can get a notification when they come back in. But yeah, all right, I had a good time. I think I'm gonna cook something now because I'm getting pretty hungry. And that's about it. All right, till next video, stay dry in the woods.